Hey, it's Qingque here. With Qingque becoming more and more popular by the day, and her Qingquillion damage potential becoming common knowledge, I thought I'd revisit my favorite 4-star Qingque today. I got her day 1 and have been maining her ever since. Her kit is inherently RNG, but using her right, and ideally with some Eidolons, mitigates it and makes her a high damage and very consistent powerhouse. Since she's an old 4-star, instead of waffling about her kit like usual, I'll do a very quick summary and then focus instead on how to use her properly, and gameplay tips, as well as secret techs that you can use in game. I'll discuss how incredible her Eidolons are too, as well as her best relics, main stats and Lycone options. I'll finish with best synergies and team comps. Like and sub if you're cool, or even if you're not, because I appreciate you either way. And let me know below how many 5-star pities you ruined for Qingque. Anyway, let's begin. She's a 4-star Quantum Erudition unit, specializing in AoE damage, except she drops a ton of blast attacks, meaning she actually has amazing single target power. At level 80, she has a base HP of 1023, a high base attack of 652, and a base defense of 441. She also has a speed of 98, and the highest current energy cost at 140. Finally, she has a lower chance of being hit than most paths as an Erudition unit. So now for a quick kit rundown. Her talent stacks up tiles indicated on her UI. These tiles are one of 3 possible suits, and they can be drawn from her skill, her technique, or whenever an ally starts their turn, including her own. When she hits 4 tiles of the same suit, she enters the hidden hand state, stopping her from using her skill, enhancing her basic attack, and giving her a large attack percent buff, which wears off after this enhanced basic attack. Her basic is nothing special, and will throw away a tile from the suit with the fewest tiles from her hand. So say you have 2 tiles of one suit and 1 of another, it will throw away that other tile. Then you have her enhanced basic attack, which is a high damaging blast attack, meaning she hits 1 target for a lot of damage and 2 adjacent targets for a bit less. Unfortunately, this enhanced basic attack only regenerates 20 energy and doesn't generate any skill points. Her skill will draw 2 J tiles on each use, granting a stacking damage percent buff for each use up to 4 times, and not ending your turn upon being used. This is important for a tech later. Her ultimate costs 140 energy, and deals large quantum damage to all enemies rather than just 3. It also makes her obtain 4 J tiles of the same suit, meaning she gains her talent's hidden hand state. Finally, her technique is a buffing technique and makes her draw 2 J tiles immediately when the battle starts. This is good if you're fast to save on skill points, but not great if you're slow. Her traces give her some quality of life, more damage percent amp from her skill, and a near permanent speed increase, on top of quantum damage percent, attack percent, and defense percent. Unfortunately, she has no crit traces. Before we fully explain her gameplay, we have to go through her crazy Eidolons, because from E4 onwards, she becomes a whole new beast. Her E1 is nothing special, it gives her ult a very tiny boost. Her E2 though, makes her rotation shorter, as she will gain 1 energy per ally turn and 2 per skill use. On top of rotation being shorter, this energy can come in clutch for certain combos. Now onto her E4. Her E4 gives her a 24% fixed chance, so no effect hit rate shenanigans, of activating autarky upon using a skill. And each skill use has this 24% chance. Autarky basically makes her repeat her enhanced basic or normal basic after attacking. You won't get extra energy, and it won't work if the enemy dies from the initial basic attack, but on high HP enemies, this E4 is disgusting. It counts as both a follow-up and basic, so no worries about planar sets either. Also, this autarky attack won't get the talent's hidden hand attack buff since she throws away her 4 of a kind, but she still has every other buff, including her skill's damage percent ones, allowing for 2 enhanced basics with all those juicy buffs. It's incredible, and it's something you have to try in game to see just how strong it is, and it's a theoretical 30% damage increase from E3. Her E5 is another 10% DPS increase as it makes her damage percent boost and enhanced basic scaling much stronger. Now she can gain a total of 163% damage buff all by herself. Finally, her E6 recovers 1 skill point upon using an enhanced basic, now making her skill point usage way less of a problem, and completing her as a very strong unit, 5-star worthy for sure. So the way we want to play Qingque is very different from our first perceptions of her kit. We did know she wanted to use skills as a main carry, but there are new techs and tips that she can use to abuse the RNG in her favor to do insane amounts of damage. Qingque may seem very skill point intensive, but look at Lune spamming 3 skills a turn. He does have help, but skill point intensity is no longer a problem. Instead of ignoring it or avoiding it, we actually want her to use these skill points. And her not using skill points, especially post E4, is actually against what we want. In version 1.0, bad RNG was not getting 4 of a kind outside of her turn. But now we know that's the opposite of what we actually want. And so bad RNG these days is getting too close to that hidden hand state outside of her turn, because we want to use skills. Of course, there's still the RNG of not hitting the 4 of a kind in her actual turn, but she's much more consistent now we know how she works. She self-buffs by 38% damage every skill at level 10, for a total of 152% damage, which is disgusting to have on the DPS and is the highest damage percent amp in the game. With that said, let's see how we want to use her skill. We want to ideally get 2 to 3 skill uses a turn, gaining a huge damage percent amp for our enhanced basic, which is 80% of our damage. With E4, these skill uses also give us a chance to proc autarky, so we want to use skills. And from 3 skill uses onwards, your odds of autarky are above 50%. For 4 of a kind, with 3 skill uses on our turn, our probability of hitting 4 of a kind ranges from 50% at 1 starting tile to 90% at 3 starting tiles of the same suit. You'll have allies going in between your Qingque turns, so you'll always start with more than 1 tile anyway, meaning our probability of hitting 4 of a kind with 3 skills is more like 70 to 90%. Of course, her situation and the game state can vary a bit, and having the game knowledge to decide if you want to skill or not can change up how effective she is. Having skill point positive teammates to generate her skill points is mandatory. Her skill also has a bonus tech, a resurgence type tech like Xela and Blade have. Her skill counts as an action, meaning for example she can proc Yukong's third passive multiple times. That's not the big part though, because even though it's an action, it won't end Xingshui's turn, entering her in a weird action state. What this means is any buff applied to her after using her skill at least once will be applied just like usual, but will not tick down at the end of her turn. This means if you have a Bronya ult that originally lasts 2 turns, you can now make it last 3 of Xingshui's turns. This is another reason why she's so strong. Blade can do it every 4 turns and Xela every kill if you time it right, but Xingshui can just do it every turn, even if she doesn't hit 4 of a kind. Let me know below if you knew about this tech or any similar techs below. A final tip is about using her ultimate. You'll always want to use her ultimate before her enhanced basic, especially if you got a bunch of skills off. Using ultimate after your turn seemed nice in 1.0 since you wouldn't have to use skill points to get that hidden hand state. But now we know that depriving Xingshui of multiple skill uses means a big drop in damage, so we actually don't want the ultimate's second effect. On top of that, if we ult before her enhanced basics, we get the large attack percent buff, which is 72% at level 10, on our ultimate. We won't get that if we ult afterwards. Finally, if you spend a ton of skill points and don't end up hitting 4 of a kind, using your ult means those skills won't be fully wasted. So the ideal scenario is 3 skills, 4 if you have the skill points, into ultimate, into enhanced basic, with a second enhanced basic coming out if you have E4. When you hit this combo, you will feel like an absolute god. Now, to make your Xingshui truly shine, you want to farm the 4-piece quantum set. She has so many self-damage percent buffs and attack percent buffs that enemy modifiers and crit buffs scale her much better. The 10 to 20% def ignore on quantum set is no joke. For early game, you may use Musk or a combo of Musk and Quantum. For planar ornaments, you'll want to farm Rutilant Arena, which is nice for also farming kill for her supports. Inert Sao Soto and Space Sealing Station are a bit behind, with Inert becoming better at E4. For main stats, you want a crit body, speed boots, quantum damage orb, and attack percent rope. Attack percent boots is an option for a sub DPS Xingshui, but we are kind of past that. Energy rope may seem nice for that 140 energy cost, but it really isn't worth the trade-off of base stats, and most of her damage is tied to enhanced basics anyway. For an endgame stat goal, you can go for at least 2.5k attack, 129 speed, and a 70 to 140 crit ratio. You can end up having higher attack or crit depending on the light cone. The 129 speed means with her 10% speed passive, she ends up having 2 actions in the first cycle, so it's a pseudo 134 breakpoint. As for light cones, the general recommendation is Before Dawn and Genius's Repose S5, followed by Peaceful Day S5 and then Milky Way or Breakfast. Before Dawn is great and becomes greater at E4 with the follow-ups. Genius's Repose has the highest ceiling in my calculations, but I have substat limitations that make these crit stats much nicer. If you can keep its uptime permanently, it's top tier, which isn't hard on Qingque. Peaceful Day synergizes with her high energy cost, but with 3 skills a turn on average, she is spewing out damage percent bonuses already, so it's not her best, but is a very great option. Milky Way ranges from God tier to terrible depending on the enemy state, but with 3 average enemies and consistent team breaks, it's a very solid option for those who might have pulled it. Finally, Breakfast is free to play and nearly as good as the rest. Onto her energy rotation. She has a maximum of 7 turns to hit her ultimate with 7 basics, or 6 turns with kills or hits. E6 Tingyun can reduce this to 4 turns at E0 Qingque. At E2, she gains 1 energy per tile drawn, and so easily now makes a 6-turn rotation, but with hits or kills drops this down to 5. She can also use Tingyun to make this a 3 to 4 turn rotation at E2, and Tingyun can rotate her own ultimate back very easily. You will end up having your ultimate pretty frequently in practice as she wipes the board with her high damage. So let's discuss pros and cons before we go on to her synergies and teams. For pros, we have her immense self-damage buffs. 72% attack, 152% damage buff, it's a bit silly. We also have great single target and AoE damage. She kinda has it all depending on what you need. We also have buff extension capabilities with her skill on any turn of hers. We then have her being a 4-star. Yes, you may have not dropped her in 200 pulls, but eventually you will E6 her, and at E6 she is incredible. We also have her being quantum, meaning she has some staying power with Mono Quantum's full potential in the future. Finally, she is free to play for her first copy, so new players can explore the gremlin's power ASAP. For cons, we have RNG. Yes, we are looking to use her skill many times, but sometimes you don't hit that 4 of a kind with 4 skills, and then your skill point economy and turns afterwards are a bit screwed. Another bad part of RNG is getting her 4 of a kind out of turn, and then her current turn will be a bit ruined since you have no skill uses. We also have high NG cost. Luckily, it's not a mandatory ultimate, but it is a pain without kills to get to it, and it's a lot of AoE damage. Finally, we have Eidolon gating. I used her day 1 at E0, and I now have her Eidolons, but she is definitely not the same unit pre-E4, and E5 and E6 further reinforce her crazy power too. For synergies, we have offensive debuffers. This is Pela, Silverwolf, and kind of Guoba and Weld. Since she has so many self buffs, enemy modifiers such as defense reduction, resistance reduction, and vulnerability increases make Qingque's damage scale much better than something like a Tingyun. Guoba and Welt don't work as well due to skill point needs or just their power in general, but Pela and Silverwolf shine for similar as well as very different reasons. Pela applies AoE Death Shred, which is perfect for Qingque. She also generates skill points out the wazoo, which makes her a perfect teammate for Qingque. You also have the added potential of Pela acting twice before Qingque with the Wind Set and Tutorial Light Cone, which can add another tile and another skill point. Death Shred scales exponentially too, meaning the quantum set gains even more power with Pela or Silverwolf. Just watch out, sometimes she might be too fast that she ends up generating too many tiles for Qingque. Silverwolf doesn't have the AoE damage amp that Qingque would love, but Silverwolf's single target power is great too, and Qingque's blast attacks don't mind at all. Qingque will also be enjoying the high resistance reduction, as well as the weakness implant. Silverwolf can enable Mono Quantum for Qingque, meaning you can bring this gremlin anywhere. She isn't fully skill point positive like Pela, but that's not too bad. Another synergy is Bronya, as always. The fact that you can enhance basic into Bronya into maybe enhance basic is pretty big for bursts of damage. The crit buff helps too because of previously stated reasons. You can do 3 things with Bronya. If you have E1 S1 Bronya and E6 Qingque, you might not run into these problems, but skill points are a big problem with these 2 units together. For example, if you just use 2 to 3 skills on your first Qingque's turn, and then you use Bronya's skill, you're not going to be able to hit another enhanced basic on Qingque unless you get super lucky. So the first way to avoid this is to put a unit in between Qingque and Bronya on your tuning. This allows for 3 generated tiles, making your probability of hitting 4 of a kind much better. The other thing you can do is Qingque basic, Bronya skill, and then use your normal Qingque combo. This allows for 40 energy per Qingque action, makes Bronya skill point neutral, and then you can use your Qingque skill points like usual. She does throw away a tile on her basics, but that's okay since she draws 2. The final option can be a skill basic rotation Bronya at a high speed, but that requires some higher speed needs. So for teams, you can plop her in a Mono Quantum team. Mono Quantum with 2 sustain is not ideal, since both Lynx and Fushuan can solo sustain. Instead, you want to bring 1 Quantum sustain, Qingque, Silverwolf, and then you want to match the 4th slot to a harmony or offensive debuffer of the enemy weakness. So for example, into 5 week, you can bring in Asta, and you'll have 100% Quantum implant chance. You can of course bring her in a hypercarry team too, with 2 harmonies or harmony and nihility. This can be for example Bronya Pella, which I use very often with her. You can also run her as a slow sub DPS when you're starting out and have a different main carry, and you let your fast teammates let her get her hidden hand state with no skill points used on her part, because every ally turn means a tile generated for Qingque. Another team I like is her with Yukong and an out of turn damage dealer like Herta for tons of burst damage, as well as abusing Yukong's buffs on a secondary DPS. This won't clear as fast as Hypercarry or Mono Quantum though. Let me know below how many QQ Eidolons you have and sub if you're cool, which I know you are. Thanks to my awesome YouTube members, thank you for watching and have a good day.